All right, so welcome to the very first Book Eaters podcast. I am April Freeman.
I'm Michelle Karsk.
And with us is the lovely Iris Arroyo, who is our silent but focused editor and the Roz to our Frasier. And
I'm the everything person.
You're our everything.
Thanks.
So today is our very first edition, and we are basically talking about audiobooks. There are a lot of podcasts for books in general, but not too many about audiobooks. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about audiobooks, I think, is that it has made literature so much more accessible to people who, maybe didn't read a lot of books,
right,
and now are really getting into all of the wonderful ways you can escape through good storytelling.
I mean, also, I think that the primary purpose of audiobooks is to keep us from being evil people while driving. Like, 100%, if it weren't for audiobooks, I would be a different human being. Like, my soul would be corrupted by Atlanta traffic. I'm sure of it.
Well, so that's primarily where I listen to as well as in the car. And my boyfriend, Nate, who may occasionally make appearances on the show, I don't think he would mind me saying, is dyslexic. And so reading was always a struggle for him. But audiobooks, of course, and he's one of those people that can listen to an audiobook while doing other things. Like, I can wash dishes and listen to the audiobook. I can vacuum, I can drive, but I can't do my taxes while I listen to an audiobook. Nate can do that.
What?
He can do that. I have quizzed him because, like, we'll be listening to an audiobook and he's surfing the internet and I'm like, you're not even paying attention. What did they just say? And he can tell me word for word what just happened.
Are you sure it's not eidetic memory?
I don't know. He's got a gift that I do not have.
Okay.
Because I get really sucked in, and I'm oblivious to things going on around me. But okay, so here's what's interesting. So you've always listened to audiobooks. I am a person, I guess it's one of those things where it's like your learning style, if you're a visual learner or a audio learner, or
right.
There's another kind too, I think. And for me, I am going to absorb the story, the characters, everything way more if I'm actually reading. So
yeah, for me, no. I've always been an auditory learner. If I'm reading a book, it doesn't sync as well with me as if I'm reading. Plus, I'm not visual at all. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I have like an issue remembering faces. Oh, yeah. Like, I'm looking at both of you right now, but if you were to be abducted and the police were like, can you give us a description of what Iris and April looks like? I'd be like, no. I think I might have a photo. Because I don't have that ability to recall.
Can you not remember faces, but would you be able to remember what we were wearing?
No,
is it just
unless
faces?
We talked about it. If you said, oh, I'm wearing a yellow shirt, then I would be able to be like, yeah, April was wearing a yellow shirt because she mentioned that she was wearing a yellow shirt.
Interesting.
And so I heard that and I can remember.
Interesting. Okay, so mine is the opposite.
Okay.
Like, if you tell me your name, I'm going to forget it. But if I see it on your name tag, it's locked in. Oh. So this is why it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
And I think in the future what we may do, because the reason why I listen to audiobooks is, I am an adult now and I have adulting duties and my leisure time is limited. And if I waited for the luxury of being able to curl up with a book, I would probably only read 4 or 5 books a year, and I am not okay with that.
Yeah,
so,
no. I mean, you need to read like a book a month minimum.
Right. And so for my job, I travel throughout the day to different locations. So I'm in the car sometimes 3-4 hours a day, which is great, opportunity to listen. So that's how I got into it. But I'm still preferring to read the book versus listening to it. The only real advantage I see to audiobooks is pronunciations. For especially Michelle and I both really like fantasy, and a lot of that shit's made up.
So what happens though sometimes is that if they switch narrators between series of books, they'll pronounce names differently, or sometimes like in Wheel of Time, they'll pronounce the same name different in different books, and it makes it so that I don't know who that character is. Like, I'm like, who are they even talking about? And then I'm like, oh, she's just pronouncing that differently, which is frustrating.
Yeah, it can be. So,
and it wouldn't happen if you were reading it. You would know.
Right. Right. Well, so I think that's going to be interesting to see how this podcast develops, because one of the things that I hope that we can explore is what the different experience is from reading a book to listening to a book. Is it significant?
Yeah.
And then I think one of the first discussions we had about audiobooks that kind of inspired this podcast is the amount of trust that you put into that narrator.
Right.
Because that narrator is essentially aborting the voice that you would have created for that book. And so you're giving that over to someone else. They will control the inflection. Did that person say it sarcastically? Maybe they didn't mean it that way, but you're trusting that narrator.
You're saying, all right, so you're deciding for me how the characters sound, what the characters are like.
Right.
And sometimes a bad narrator will ruin a perfectly good book.
Yes.
Perfectly good book, but then the narrator makes it sound like the character's an idiot, and you're like, oh, I fucking hate that girl.
Yeah, I'm not even rooting for this person.
I can't even. And then you're like, wait, why don't I like her? Oh, because she's whiny. Well, she's only whiny because
the narrator has a whiny voice.
reading her that way. Yeah.
Yeah. But conversely, I have experienced the opposite, where a really good narrator brings that character to life way better than I would have on my own.
For sure.
Made someone more sympathetic, made someone funnier. So those are the kind of the things that we'll talk about, either hopefully get people interested into audiobooks that aren't already into them, maybe shed a little bit of attention on some audiobooks that we've enjoyed, maybe do the compare and contrast between the book and the audiobook.
Right.
We have some hopefully willing guests that will be contributing as well to give us kind of the technical perspective of what it's like to be a narrator, and also as an author, what amount of input you have for choosing, who narrates your book. And so that's kind of the backstory on the audiobook and what we're hoping to do. And then the other thing that we wanted to talk about was how we came up with the title for the podcast, which is Book Eaters. And so a little shout out to Savannah Schnall. So Iris, Michelle, and myself are all members of a meetup Facebook tribe of lady geeks of Atlanta is what the group is. That's how we all met. There's tons of offshoots of that group, and one of the activities that we were doing was hiking one day. Savannah was there. We're hiking, we're talking, and she made the comment about how, when you're a voracious reader, it's like you're eating the book.
And so you just can't get it down fast enough. You're like, what's happening?
Yes,
what's going on?
You just devour them. And so that's where we came up with Book Eaters. And in making sure that no one else had already thought of this title,
I totally Googled Book Eaters.
Tell us about this, Michelle.
So what is that website called where they have Urban Dictionary or whatever?
Yes.
And apparently Book Eaters is a thing about people who like to read books and then touch themselves. I'm guessing erotically touch themselves, not just touch their nose randomly or do as calisthenics, but and I was like, ooh.
Touch themselves with the book?
I feel like while reading the book or listening to the book, or maybe with the book, I feel like it's some sort of masturbatory experience with books.
And not necessarily just erotica, but
Harry
Harry Potter.
Book. Oh God, not Harry Potter. Why would you do that to Harry Potter? It's just wrong.
There are some parts of Harry Potter.
No, they're children. They're children. I can't.
Well, okay, this took a turn.
This took a dangerous, ugly turn. So, no, there isn't anyone in Harry Potter that I would like to masturbate to. Not Snape.
Serious?
Not Dumbledore. Who else is there? Sirius Black?
Yes. Remus?
I feel like he was always unbathed.
I would give him a bath.
Maybe that was because of the show. And in the movie, he always looked a little unbathed. I think maybe because he was in prison so long.
Well, yeah, he was in prison,
But they never really cleaned him up. Really?
Well, maybe he got acclimated to that level of hygiene. Dumbledore? No?
No.
Of course, now he may be homosexual.
He is, I think. It's been confirmed. That really doesn't matter.
Well, it kind of does matter. Totally matters.
Not like you ever had a shot with him. You never had a shot with Dumbledore.
You do not know that.
Dumbledore is a
you do not
character.
Know that. I have a feeling, if I were a character in Harry Potter, I would be like the Madame Roserta type. I would be the background character, but I have a lot of stories because I'm always kind of there, even though I'm not central. And I think if I had a bar, if I tended my own bar, it would be my own bar.
Right.
And Dumbledore came in over the years, I'd like to think that he would find occasional and complete solace in my company. Sort of like Iris's mango during the peach tree. I would be what re-energized him so that he could go back out and finish. Onward. So that's how the name of the podcast came to be. And we decided that our first topic for said podcast is just to add some amount of structure to this format would be, I know when I'm reading a book, as much as I may love the story, and sometimes because I love the story too much and I'm just ready to get to what's going to happen, skimming occurs.
Yeah.
And for me, that is most likely to occur when we're getting too much into the geography of a place. I don't have the ability, I have no sense of direction, and so I love, this will be another thing to talk about, is books that have things that you're not going to get in the audio book, like a
maps
map
and stuff,
and a family tree and photos, or little drawings and illustrations. So if there's not a map, I'm really going to struggle with remembering which countries are where and, what route they took to get to, through the mountain pass.
To be fair, even if there was a map, I would still have trouble. I would still struggle because I have no concept of how maps work.
Right. Or also, it doesn't even necessarily have to be geography. It could just be the description of, the land, like whenever it just starts to get a little too descriptive, I do kind of skim. I don't want to say that I just look for dialogue.
Right.
But, that is the driving thing. And then the other thing that will usually make me skim is fight scenes. I'm like, okay, who wins the fight? Let's just, get to it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be harder to skim in a audiobook. So
it's not necessarily harder. Like, I just reread a book because I run a book club, Anything But Scary Clowns book club.
Right.
For Lady Geeks. And sometimes they choose a book I've already listened to. And so in order to be able to participate in the conversation, I sometimes will just re-listen to the book. And I found that what I will skim through or check out, so it's not like you skim. Like when you are reading, you can just and throw it. But when you're listening, although you can make it go faster, which I do. Like I listen on a higher speed than when it's designed to, right? So like I listen at 1.3 or something because I talk fast and I want it to talk fast. But you can do that. Sometimes I will increase it. Any part where I would be embarrassed for the character and I know it's coming because I already read it and it hurts me.
You get that inward cringe and you're just like...
And I want to leave the room. And sometimes I just do. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to leave the phone here. And I'm going to curl my hair for a second because I can't manage this part again. I can't do it. I don't need... No.
Oh, that's a good one.
Like so when I reread something, I'll skim.
That's a really good example.
I remember I read Les Mis when I was in high school. Have you guys read Les Miserables?
Yes.
And it's like 90% war scenes.
Yes.
And I feel like I skimmed the whole thing.
Well, back to Harry Potter, I often skipped through the Quidditch stuff. So I know. So I mean, it's a sport.
Oh, I love
sports ball.
I love sports.
So so knowing that, I just assume that everyone skims through battles.
No, I think
Iris is shaking her head. You read. Do you actually visualize it though? Are you able to see? And he parries the thrust, and he does a tuck and roll. I don't know fight words, but I mean, the only thing about a fight scene that I want to actually read is when someone has their moment. Like they rally and they draw from the inward courage that they didn't know that they had, or two people who maybe have struggled to find their camaraderie, and then they have that moment where they're like, I thought I hated you, but no, we're all in this together, that kind of a moment. But am I talking too loud? I feel like I got a little too passionate. Maybe because Nate, the aforementioned, love of my heart.
He just waved.
We decided we may want to do like a cocktail that would fit in with our podcast, because I think all three of us are about any reason to drink. So to go with skimming, we thought foam. And so Nate has brought us a cocktail in a coupe glass, because I'm of the opinion that every drink tastes better in a coupe. And it has foam on the top, so that
cheers.
We're not going to skim it, but we could if we wanted to. So a little clink clink. And this is a drink that Nate made up, and it's called April's Last Gamble.
It is quite tasty.
Oh, it is. Thank you, Nate. Yes. Kudos. Thumbs up. So now we'll have this libation.
Have a moment to enjoy our libation.
Yes, this is... Ooh. What? So obviously, with the podcast, we will be having a Facebook page. Our social media guru, Miss Michelle, will be managing that.
A guru might be a little bit hard.
So maybe we could put the recipe on the thing if the people would like to try it. This is a gin-based drink with a little elderflower. It's not Saint Germain, because I cheaped out and got the off-brand, but it's still very tasty.
I mean, it's delicious.
And so
maybe we should take a photo of it.
Yeah, we'll put that up on the thing too. Yeah. Ooh, Iris is talking.
Just like foods, when you have foods and there's certain drinks with foods, are there any drinks any type of books that you prefer to have a drink with?
Oh, good question.
That is an excellent question.
I think that's definitely true of movies and music for me.
Definitely. Like whenever I watch Lucifer or Supernatural, I feel like I have to have a whiskey.
Oh, so like maybe if we're reading Hemingway. You know,
I mean, it's been like since college since I've read Hemingway.
I don't know if that's a great question, and I don't know if I actually do this, but I do know, like, if I'm reading like Jane Austen, all of a sudden I feel like I should have a sherry, and I'll start talking in a horrible accent, but I never actually have sherry or I'm like a glass of port, you know, and I'm like, you want to do it. Same thing like with food too, you know, if they're eating something, I'm like,
that is true, because when I was listening to The Wheel of Time, I craved like a cherry cider. Sort of, and I literally was like searching for the perfect one to drink, well, because they kept drinking something in The Wheel of Time,
like a Dornish red.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting because, and this may be a good time to let people know that there may be a slight skewing of topics toward fantasy, because we are the lady geeks.
That's true.
But I certainly read other genres and would not be opposed to talking about those in the podcast.
I mean, my book club is called Anything But Scary Clowns, and we do read or listen to a myriad of types of books, like true crime, occasionally biographies, like whatever we vote on. But it does tend to be more fantasy because we are nerds.
Okay, so let's dip our toe then into the horror genre. I think the only book that I've ever truly been scared to read, and this would have been when I was around 11, was Amityville Horror. And I literally got to parts where I had to shove the book under my pillow, wait for my heart to stop, gird my loins, and I can still remember like all the chapters like had flies on the page.
Yeah.
And oh my!
Did you read Whitley Strieber?
No.
Oh my God! Like I can't think about it without being scared. Right now, talking about it, I can feel something's watching me from behind. It was about like alien abduction, but horrible things happened to those characters. It was terrible.
Sounds great.
It was awful. I don't.
Yeah, I don't really get scared. And like even in a horror movie, like after the movie's over, it doesn't stay with me. I'm not like, ooh, what's under the bed?
Oh.
I don't like them, and I do get the shit scared out of me all the time, but it's more that the jump scare thing.
I love a jump scare.
And the music where you know something's about to happen and you're just waiting, and the dread is just, you can wear it like a cloak.
I love it.
But then once it's over, it's not like those themes stay with me and I'm like, something is going to get me.
Oh, it depends. That's why I love like a cheesy action book or movie, because it's got like sort of like a vein of joy. It's just a little bit outside the suspension of disbelief where you know that it's not real. I did the true crime, or listened to one true crime book, and it was
Yeah, now true crime is different.
Like
True
I
crime,
mean, I couldn't
yes.
sleep for a while because it's real.
It's real. Those
You know.
people are out there.
It was pretty scary. It was the one Patton Oswalt's
Why
wife?
the McNamara?
Yeah. Michelle McNamara.
I have it. I haven't read it yet though.
Oh gosh.
Now I don't know if I
Honey,
should.
but they caught him, so it's okay.
Yeah, but it just.
I mean, it took him like
there
60
is a
years
certain
or
amount,
something, but
but my favorite murder. There's a whole podcast about it. There is a certain fascination with, true crime because it is the monsters among us. It's real. It could be your neighbor that you just wave to as he's watering his lawn, and it's so weird that people can have such compartmentalized personalities that you don't know them. Like these men who keep killing their wives, and I feel like if Nate was going to murder, which Nate and I have a pact, we have looked each other in the eye. We're not married, never probably will be, but we have made a vow, and that is that we will not murder each other. We will not, no matter how bad it gets. We will not end the other person's life.
Jesus.
So I'm good with that. I think that is a promise that could be kept. But these women who...
There's none that's till death do us part.
Like, how can you be married to someone, have children with someone, and not know that they're capable of that?
I think everyone is capable of it.
I'm not capable of that.
Sure you are.
I am not.
In the right...
I wish I were. I wish I was dangerous.
In the
and
right
people didn't know what the fuck
In the
might
right
happen.
circumstances, we're all capable of anything.
I don't think I'm that interesting.
If you're pushed a certain way in the right exact moment, anything is possible.
I honestly just don't believe that. Like I can remember, I got pregnant very young, and I literally was 11 months pregnant. not really, but it was very far along in my pregnancy, and I did not believe I was pregnant. Like really feel like the baby was moving until I was being wheeled out of the hospital with the child. And then I was like, "Oh shit! I'm having a baby." Not because I didn't think anything bad could happen. I just didn't think anything that dramatic would ever happen to me.
So, with that saying, you're just saying with me right now, you're proving our point that you can believe in your heart that something's not true, but it is.
It's just so after school specialist, special-ish.
I think people love reading these type of stories because it's down deep inside, it makes us wonder about who we are.
Well, I've never done anything. Well, I can't say that.
Did you guys ever read V.C. Andrews?
Yes.
So I had the entire collection because my parents bought them for me, and I'm not sure
that's weird
if they knew what they were buying.
I feel like maybe they
were probably just like, "Oh, she's reading. Let's support that." And I couldn't even get through them all. Like there was a part where I was like, "Okay, that's too much for me. It's violent, whatever." But
I think the incest is what.
The incest is a feature. It's not a bug in the book series. But if you read or you saw the movie Flowers in the Attic, is that what it's called? Yeah. Like the grandmother character, right? You hate her and you think that she's just evil and just born evil and whatever. But if you read the book series from the beginning, she is the heroine in the first book, and you were really rooting for her. And then you slowly watch her become the monster that she is, and you understand who she is in Flowers in the Attic, which you can't imagine ever understanding or even like sympathizing with that character. But somehow V.C. Andrews, in all of her sick twistedness, managed to make me like kind of like root for that character and hope for redemption arc, which never happens in V.C. Andrews. Spoiler alert. But still, I feel like because of those experiences with books, that's why I feel like anybody can become anything.
You have just inspired a future topic.
Oh my gosh.
Which would be childhood favorites before the advent of audiobooks. I mean, they were book on tapes, but those were pretty rare. So if they were, and they're always, like they do remakes of movies. So all of these books that you loved so much as a child, like what if they reissued them as audiobooks?
I'm sure that they did. I'm sure that you can get an audio version of Flowers in the Attic. Not that I want to subject myself to that.
Plus there's a lot of like really obscure books that I can remember reading when I was a child that probably no one else has ever even heard of. Like
my favorite book is No Flying in the House. I'm sure
I'm writing
that
it down.
No Flying in the House does not have an audio version.
Probably the two that come to mind for me that I read like at least a dozen times growing up was called Seeing Summer.
Seeing Summer.
Yeah. And the other one is called Class Pictures.
Oh.
And ooh, and you know another feature that we could have on this audiobook is books that you can kind of sort of remember, but you can't remember the name of the book or the title or who wrote it. And so
every book for me.
You could like put a call out to listeners and be like, hey, I read this book and it had something to do with Native Americans, and in it there was a child, a white child who got diphtheria, and this main Indian character like took her thumb, stuck it down the throat of the child, and penetrated like this mucousy plug, pulled it out, and saved the child's life.
That's just gross.
Well, I know, but it was very evocative.
That's the kind of thing I would skim through.
No, you wouldn't. I was riveted. But I cannot remember the name of that book, so I'll probably never be able to read it again unless we build up a listenership that would be able to find that information for me.
Or just had also read the book.
The first quest has been announced.
Have you tried Google?
Yeah, I've tried, I know it had something to do with the Trail of Tears, and I mean, it was like one of those big, like Planet the Cave Bear thick books. I mean, it was
Was it
a
Planet
lot.
Cave Bear?
And she, no, it was not. No, that's not Native American.
I mean,
in any case,
it was a Native American.
There's also a book about Ireland and the potato famine that was very, very. Anyways,
I mean, that's not enough information.
I'm just saying that could be a segment where if you're struggling to remember a book that you've read in the past, you could send it in to us, and either a listener with good sleuthing skills or our Roz, who is also very good at sleuthing? The internets. She could find out.
The interwebs.
And that's a service we could bring to the people.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Okay. I feel good about it.
I mean, yeah.
It's very benevolent. This is benevolent.
I think word association is happening right now. Okay.
We'll bring it back. I think skimming was the only thing we were going to talk about. Did we explore the topic fully is the question.
I don't know. Roz, what do you think? She's looking at me like, why are you asking me questions?
I would say that if anyone ever listens to this, our inaugural podcast, this might be a time when we invite our listenership. I think that's the second time I've used that word. It's a great word, listenership. I don't know if it's real or not, but it's apropos.
I feel like we should ship our listeners.
Right. And we want to invite that participation,
Right.
We want that participation. So if there is something that they skim that we did not talk about, they could send it in to us. But I think battle scenes, overly descriptive land, geography, and like you said, the acute embarrassment where you feel it with them, and
or just a part that you hate in the book. Like when you reread it, you're like, or re-listen to it, you're like, I remember this part, and I can't handle it. Like this is the part where the baby dies, and I can't hear the baby die again. All right, but you're like, okay, that part.
But you keep talking about it as with re-listens. Is there anything that you skim the first time through?
Things will make me check out, right? Characters that I hate. Storylines. Like I'm like this with everything. Like there's always a storyline in a book or in a show that I just don't like. And if I'm watching it on TV, I can just fast forward through it. But in the books, usually I'm driving, and so it's required by law that I not touch anything. So I have to, but I will check out. I will be like, oh.
All right, so here's an interesting question.
I don't like that guy. He's a jerk.
So here's an interesting question, though. Have you gotten caught out by skimming? Like, you've skimmed through it, and you're like, damn, I shouldn't have skimmed, because if I'd been paying more attention, something happened that I needed to know about.
So, yeah, and so sometimes that happens, like, where I'm like, wait, what? Wait, how did we get here? And then I have to go back. Yeah. And I have to go back, which means a lot of times I have to pull over to the side of the road, which is very frustrating. Or...
Do you really?
I do, because I can't manage the phone and driving at the same time. I mean, I know that it's illegal, and I'm a rule follower. That's a problem.
Yes, you're the lawful.
But
good.
Also, I just don't have the skill set to like do multiple things at one time.
So here's something, this will be good to ask you since you are such an audio learner. When I start an audiobook, it's sort of like, that loose thread of a sweater. Once you catch it, you can unravel the whole thing.
Right.
But I have to start an audiobook at least 5-6 times. I cannot. Now, reading a book is different. I can read it and get immediately sucked in. But when they're just introducing all the characters and the themes, I have to listen to the first one, sometimes even 2 chapters multiple times before I really know what's going on. Because I don't. You're the same way?
I am not. I'm a one and doneer. Like, I don't know.
The only time that doesn't ever happen is I've actually, because I bought this, ever since I bought the Kindle, I do both audio and reading at the same time.
Right.
Well, that helps out a lot.
Well, and that's
Wait,
what
you
I've
read
learned.
and you listen at the same time?
Yes.
And it stops where you both are in sync. You can have them both in sync, and so if you stop, the audio stops exactly where you stop.
I can't tell you how many times I've been listening to an audiobook and been like, fuck it, I'm going to buy the book because I need to read this.
At the same time?
You can
Yes.
with Audible.
Well, I do.
I know sometimes you can get cheaper audiobooks if you buy the Kindle version. And I got to be honest with you, I've done that. I've been like, oh, if I buy the Kindle version, it's $2. And then I get the audio version for $3 more. Or I can pay $17 for the audio version. So sometimes I have done that, but I've never actually looked at the Kindle version.
No, I almost always, if I am loving the book, I will buy the book because I want to be that immersed in it. And an audiobook, I'm only going to be immersed 60-70%. For me to be 100%, and I need the book. I need to see the words. I need to have them come into my cognizance through the language of
I'm going to be honest with
words.
you. The only time I ever buy a book is if the book is not available in audio.
Oh.
Or if I'm going to see the author and I want them to sign it.
To me, that's
anymore.
what's so interesting, and I am just wondering, and I hope that with the exploration of these podcasts, I am able to understand. Do you? And I hope this doesn't sound judgy. It's just so foreign.
She's
to
like,
me.
I'm about to judge you.
Well, no, it just is so foreign to me. Are you able to appreciate storytelling just as fully through audiobook as I am through the written word?
I feel like it's more fulfilling to me in audio.
So I'm so drawn in. Are you get just that drawn in with audiobooks?
I get sucked in where like I can't go back to sleep. Like so
Me too.
Various audiobooks functionality like Overdrive I use in the library. Libraries are amazing sources for audiobooks. Or even Audible itself has this functionality where you can do this, read to me for 10 minutes and then shut off. And I can't tell you how many times I've been like, all right, I'm just listening to 10 more minutes. And then it ends and I'm like, no, give me 10 more minutes. No, give me 10 more minutes because I'm not sucked in. Like I need to know what happens. I need to know where I am and I gotta get to a place.
But do you get to where like you are literally not aware of your surroundings because you are so in that world?
Totally.
But when you're listening, you've got visual input. You know, you're looking at other things.
If
when
I'm
you're
driving,
reading, you're looking at words, and
if
so
I'm
there is
driving,
no other.
It's different, right? Like if there's something else happening. But I have been to the point where I've been driving home from work and I can't stop listening to the audiobook. And so I go into my house and then I put it on my Alexa and I'm listening to it in the kitchen while I'm doing stuff. And then I just find myself that it's 6 hours later and I've been sitting on my couch listening to the audiobook. And I'm like, crap, I got to go to work. I got to get some sleep because it sucks me in. And then I'm just there.
Maybe it is possible for someone to get just as absorbed by a good book through audio as written.
I mean,
I'm open to that. It seems crazy. It seems nutso.
I think it depends on who you are, though. Like, if you're a visual person, then you might need to see it. But if you're an audio person like me, like hearing it is going to be better than reading it.
Wow. That is, counterintuitive and opens up a whole new thing for me.
The same thing when you're reading, your imagination is envisioning all the emotions are going in. And then in audio, you're listening to the story, but you're also influenced by the narrator.
Right.
Yeah.
Which goes back into the trust thing, you know? And at some point, that can be one of the things that we talk about is like which audiobook narrators, like well-known voice actors, that were like, okay, if they're narrating it, I'm in.
Sure. And I have a couple.
I have a few.
I will search to see what they're doing, and then be like, all right, I'm gonna listen to that one. Like Will Wheaton. I love Will Wheaton.
Well, so here's what I like, and
he makes good choices too.
And Neil Gaiman, because if the author is a good narrator, obviously that is.
But that's really, really, really rare. Like usually if the narrator or if the author is narrating it, it's not fantastic.
Well, I mean, I don't know if y'all ever read like The Goldfinch, which was pretty famous book a few years back, but that was written by Donna Tartt, and I've read, I think, all of her books. She's one of those writers that books are primarily about plots and the tale.
Right.
But Donna Tartt is very much the beauty of language and the written word.
Right.
And that and reading The Goldfinch reminded me of that it's not always about the story, it is about words.
But words are powerful, but because of how they sound.
Right. Well, so she narrated,
right.
I think it was The Secret History is the audiobook that I listened to, and I love her writing, but as a narrator, not that great. But who better to trust, because she does know if she meant for that person to sound short-tempered. Right. She meant for that person to sound, sarcastic. She knows, and so you obviously, if the author is narrating, you can trust them. But there's an art to it.
They need to be able to, like,
I hope Donna Tartt never listens to this podcast. I'm sorry, Donna Tartt. I love
Donna.
you. but maybe pick someone else next time.
I mean,
the author, I guess, has to trust the narrator too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to trust.
Yes.
Which sometimes in stories, you can't trust the narrator because the narrator lies. Like, it's not always the case where, as a reader, the narrator is being truthful to us.
Okay, well, that brings up a very
That's the thing. I mean, like, I have to be honest with you. Like, there are a number of stories where I was like, I trusted you and you let me down, because they don't always tell you the truth. So, I mean, it's not always the person reading the book's fault. Sometimes it's the author who's written the narrator to be unreliable on purpose, just to mess with me.
I'm writing that down for
not
a future,
bitter about,
because I think a future topic. I don't want to get into it now because it deserves a lot more time than our inaugural podcast.
Right.
But how problematic is it for, especially I think, an audiobook,
right,
where there's going to be a plot twist because it is an unreliable narrator, to narrate the first book where everything still is hidden in a way that it's not giving away things. But it's just like, so when you read a series or even one book, like Gone Girl is probably the most famous example of an unreliable narrator. It's not my favorite. I have others. Angelica is one that I would recommend. But so you get to the end of the story, either the series or the book, and there were all of these things, clues and hints that happened earlier. And how does a narrator read those so that it's not giving it away, but still is honest if you went back and listened to it again? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like Six of Crows. Did you guys ever read Six of Crows?
Yes.
So, and that's a cast recording, right? They intentionally left things out because it was sort of like an Ocean's 11-ing kind of thing happening, right? And I still trusted each of the stories, but I knew in my heart they weren't telling me the whole story. And I think there's a difference between I'm not telling you the whole story and I'm not telling you the truth. You know? And I feel like, for me anyway, I appreciate that way more.
I'm thinking more like when a person reacts to something that someone says as if they didn't have a key piece of information. But then later in the story, you find out that they were playing a much deeper game and knew all of that. Well, then it doesn't make sense that the narrator originally read it as being not in the know, so that you, the reader, wasn't in the know, when the character actually was in the know. You know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying. I just can't think of an example where that's occurred.
Well, me either. That's why we should put a pin in this for a future podcast, because I know that it's happened, but I can't think of a specific example.
Yeah, because I know, like, in Six of Crows, like, right, there was lots of things that were going on that I wasn't privy to until later.
But the character would have been.
But the character knew about it. But I feel like the character just wasn't telling me because they just weren't talking about it. Like, it would, like, the way that it happened is it unfolded as it unfolded, and like the narrator or the author chose to keep things, plans or scenes that had happened previous, from me until later, so that I didn't know what the full extent of the plan was until after the planet happened so that I could have the moment of, oh my God, what's going to happen?
Right. So as a listener, you're like forgiving of it because you know that they were trying to create the same intent that the author had when they wrote the book. Create the same doubts and the same questions.
Plus, they weren't reacting to something. They weren't lying to me. They were just not telling me everything.
I kind of feel like it's incongruous, and to me, it's like it's one of the plot holes, so to speak. It's problematic because you're listening to the narrator, especially in a first person point of view. You can't. It's like it would be like listening to it and then going back and listening to it and then they changed everything. You can't. You know what I'm saying? It's incongruous, and to me, it's like this. My suspension of disbelief can't go that deep into it.
I feel like with Six of Crows, though, like when I re-listen to it, it still checks out.
No, because you'd be like, if you're reading it, you read it and you're hearing it in your own voice. So the mistake is in how you interpreted it.
Right.
But if you're counting on the narrator has all the information. It's not your voice.
Right.
So how did they make the mistake?
How did they mess it up? Well, I mean, I guess maybe Six of Crows would be bad because
we're gonna research this.
I mean, I don't want to cast any aspersions on Leigh Bardugo because she's my favorite.
You love her. You've got a girl crush on
I
her.
love her.
Yes.
But I see what you're saying. You like that the narrator should have more information than I have.
Exactly.
So why is the narrator not giving me all the information and the richness and tone
right
that could be?
Or like, oh, that's what they meant. Well, yeah, that's what she meant. So why didn't she say it that way the first time? We'll come back to this, but this brings an interesting thing for the podcast. We're going to come back to this, although this would be a great time that if listeners did have a specific example, like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, they could send it in and make it much easier
so
on us.
I just think, like, the 5th season. Have you read the 5th season or listened to the 5th season?
J.K. Jemisin.
Something like that? Yeah.
We've got to get better about this if we're going to do this.
J.K. Jemisin. But so I feel like I can't talk about without spoiling it, though, which is, but you know what I'm talking about.
Mental ellipses, spoiler alert, ... Michelle is about to talk something about the 5th season. If you have not read that, this would be a time to skim. See how I tied it
skim through this because I don't want to
leave the room.
Should I? But I don't know if I want to. But I'm just saying that there's parts in that story, right, where
do not give away.
I don't care
who's listening. Do not give away.
I'm not. Because there are parts in the story where after you finish reading it, you're like, what the actual? The narrator knew all of the things and then didn't tell you all the things and like intentionally led you astray for a long period of time.
I feel like that in that case it was believable because it was so compartmentalized.
Right. Know? Okay.
And without giving it away too much.
Right. You don't want to, because that's the cool bit about the book.
I'm going to cover up my microphone. And it was because...
You can't cover up your microphone. That's not how podcasts
That's not how
work.
science... It's not science.
You can't, have the conversation aside. That's not fair.
But you know what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying.
Let's just stop.
We'll drop it.
So is that good for our first one?
I mean, I feel like that's probably a good place to end it, like in a terrible place where everyone should read the 5th season immediately so that you know what we're talking about.
And this seems relevant.
Because it's also amazing audiobook.
It is.
And it's a trilogy, which I believe is finished.
It's a
trilogy?
Okay.
Trilogy. And I believe it's finished, right?
Yes.
I haven't read the 2nd or the 3rd book yet, but I did read the 1st book twice, which is telling.
Well, and another thing that we're going to do, I hope, is read-alongs, where I read the book, Michelle listens to the book, and then we compare and contrast. I think that's going to be super fun because I am so hardcore, completely obsessed, cannot think anything could ever compare to Robin Hobb right now. And I need to be there when you experience it for the first time.
Okay.
So that's going to be another pin for a future we'll do. Ooh, and we haven't even begun to talk about cast recordings, which you kind of brought it up, and then I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Okay.
But until next time, eat the books.
Well,
savor the books.
Listen or read or...
I think that's why eating makes such sense, is because it's...
consuming.
It is one of the 5 senses that's not up for debate. Whether it's listening, whether it's reading, that is question mark. Eating is sort of the neutral taste. So eat the books, motherfuckers.
What?
We can edit that out. I just wanted to be hardcore for a minute.